we have started.
Okay, so this podcast is about new directions that we're going to be taking with our podcast. So, for all of our 5 subscribers out there, be warned. I'm just kidding. um, so, we decided to rename the podcast to QuantU. Basically, the idea is that we've got a project we've been working on together for many years in one form of another, basically. Um, yeah, that'd be interesting. So, Nathan, I'm just going to ask you. And anyway, so we're renaming the podcast to focus our efforts more. So it's going to be more focused around that project and things related to that project, so that we can just have a better focus, I guess. So, but this is what I was just thought of, Nathan, when I was going to ask you is how long do you think we've been working on this project? Like in your mind, uh, yeah, just what is the history of it?
Oh goodness. I mean, probably since 2017. Now it was that. I mean, I think that's when we started the first like idea anyway, and like built
Yeah.
like some little piece of it.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know how many versions we've gone through, or how many different ideas we've had, how many different paths we go down. But
Do you remember what that first thing was?
oh
What the
man,
first?
I don't. I think that was the first time I used Phoenix, the Phoenix framework, or maybe it might have been the second version that used Phoenix and the first used Ruby on Rails.
Yeah, it was actually the second version that used Phoenix, I think. The first version, or maybe even the third at that point, because I don't know if you remember this, but the first version I think was also a pure JavaScript app. And because like the idea, so for our listeners, let's give them a broad explanation of what QuantU is first. So what it is today is it's basically an online learning platform, or this is the goal of the project, to be an online learning platform for lifelong learners, specifically focused on the STEM fields, starting with mathematics. So right now we're really focusing on mathematics, and hopefully, someday once we get mathematics developed really well, and we have this great online platform where people can learn, advanced mathematics. So we're talking college level, graduate level mathematics, that we can also expand to other fields like engineering, physics, and those types of things. And, in the far future, in the year, I don't know, at the rate we're going, 2120 or something, but like, we would have expanded to even like all the subjects. So even humanities and social sciences and that kind of thing. And the idea is that it's, how can I describe it? Basically, we want to use technology. So traditionally, you have the classroom where you learn and like, I guess, textbooks and stuff like that. Whereas what we want to do with this platform is use all the new innovations from technology, the fact that you have this interactive web medium and we've got tons of people doing research all over the world on what are the best ways to teach yourself and learn any subject, but specifically mathematics and STEM. So we're going to use all that research and technology to build an interactive way to learn, kind of like a way of learning for the 21st century, I guess. So that's broadly speaking what it is. Would you have anything to comment on that, Nathan?
Um, I mean, you summed it up pretty good. It does sound like something someone else, like I don't know, like Brilliant or something. Which
Yeah,
I mean, it is very similar to that. I think
it's similar to Brilliant, but Brilliant still doesn't do what I would like to have.
no, I know
you know?
you didn't let me finish. Well, I mean, like I
Okay.
think the technology that we want to go into, especially like generating quizzes for almost everything, being able to build
Mhm.
tests based on what you've studied before and what you haven't seen in a while, like Anki type ideas, just incorporating all these other different systems that we've known and loved and used to learn ourselves into one
Mhm.
platform.
Yes, I think that's it. It's like because it's like what you mentioned. There's all these one-off tools that'll do a specific thing. Like, for instance, I think the thing that Brilliant gets right is that not everything needs to be a video. You know,
Mm.
a lot of times it's better to learn in sort of this idea of you're presented a little bit of information, you read that information, and then you have to solve a problem. You know, so I think and and making mistakes is something you're supposed to do. Like you're supposed to not know the answer before you try to solve something. and that's something that comes from learning research. Um, and so Brilliant does that well, but then you have things like spaced repetition, which is a way to ingrain things into your long-term memory, and that's like Anki. And so, yeah, I think it's what you said, like sort of a taking of all these different techniques that kind of already exist, that are out there in some way, and putting them together, you know?
Mm.
But it didn't start out that way. So it just started out with this idea of being able to automatically generate questions, because I was frustrated with teaching myself mathematics again. So I did a master's in computer science and focused on machine learning, and then had to teach myself all these like higher mathematics, I guess. I mean, mathematicians would consider these basic mathematics, but at the time for me, it was like more complicated mathematics, like partial derivatives and that kind of thing, and multivariable functions and all that kind of stuff. And you're just going through a textbook, right? But I wanted to have a way where I could just generate questions automatically for myself, and that those questions would be created and adapt to my learning level over time, so they would get progressively more and more difficult, and that I could improve along the way. Almost, if you can imagine, like if you had a weight training coach, he would see as you started bench pressing that you could bench press more, and he would add more weight to it, make it more and more difficult, and then you would get stronger and stronger over time. Like that kind of same idea from sports and bringing it to mathematics. And so the first version we had, if you remember this, was a JavaScript application where we would write generators in JavaScript code. Do you remember
No.
that? Anyway, but what turned out to be the problem there with that initial approach was that I think the big problem was it was just enormously difficult to write anything other than the simplest generators. So if you started doing things beyond, I don't know, algebra, So whatever technique we had used at that point, I think it was like, I forget what it was, but it was like we were writing our own JavaScript code and stuff for every generator. That was just like a one-off thing.
Yeah.
And then it went through all these different iterations, but I think we finally landed on an architecture that's pretty good, which we've been working on for over a year now. I think it's almost, we got the last little pull request in there to get the MVP out. So we're finally at that point, but it's been a long ride.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go in a little bit. So that's enough, I guess, of the background, and then why we're doing it. So, so what is this podcast now going to cover? Well, it's going to cover everything kind of related to that project. So that would be like, I don't know, on one hand, sort of technical things. So like if we develop a feature, let's say it's a quiz, a multiple choice quiz, maybe we could talk about the different, like why multiple choice is even a good option for learning, first of all. And then we could say why we developed the particular feature we developed, why it works this particular way, how we created a solution, et cetera. So that's more of on the development side of things, we can discuss how the software architecture works and that kind of thing. And then we can also do research. So like I just mentioned with the multiple choice. So why multiple choice? Who came up with that idea? Sort of the history of this, whether or not it really teaches you to learn things. Because that's another goal of this platform. And this was frustrating to me in college. It's kind of a sidetrack. But, I noticed that I would take a class, I would learn things, and I would forget them. And I mean, we have to forget things. But there are some things you learn that you don't forget, that get ingrained, And I think, for instance, I've learned multiple languages, and you don't forget those. They just get stuck in your head, and you can always speak them. I mean, you might forget a few words here or there, but more or less, you're still competent in the language. And the same thing with like being able to play the piano or the guitar, or lots of different skills,
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted learning to be more like that. So for the things that you really care about, that you could learn them and then not forget them. And that was something I found frustrating with the higher education system, is that you learn and then you forget 90% of what you learn.
Yeah, because you're kind of just learning to pass a test, essentially.
Yeah, you learn to pass the test and then you never revisit the material.
Mm.
Um, but anyway, so I think that leads me into our next topic, which would be kind of like education and, well, learning in particular, how humans learn, cognitive psychology of how humans learn. I think we're going to talk a lot about that because we've studied it a lot. I've studied it a lot. And so I think that's going to be another topic we'll talk about a lot on the podcast probably. I don't know. Do you have any comments about things you'd like to talk about?
I mean, obviously, the technology, anything we use technology wise, I'd like to,
Yeah.
or anything we don't use, why we didn't use it.
Yeah. See, I think that'll be really good because I can ask you things about the technology side because just so people know, in this relationship, Nathan's the main developer behind it because he's a much better programmer than me.
Huh?
We're both programmers, but he's significantly better than I am. So,
Yeah, you're gonna give me a
uh,
big head. I'm gonna like go to work tomorrow and be like, "Screw you, peasants! I am better than all of you." My brother says so.
but yeah, but um, whatever. uh, but anyway, what I was going to say is I think that'll be good because then I can ask you more questions about the technological side of things, and then you can ask me. Like my interest is more like academic, so I'm the one that's going to be like creating courses and then doing like reading the research papers and that kind of thing. So maybe you can ask me about the courses, the learning, and the different research papers and that kind of stuff, and then I can ask you about the software development side of things. I think that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Could be like that'll be kind of like a specialty. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, I wrote three things down. I said we could talk about this. This is related to QuantU, so challenges, and then courses, and then maybe some of the open source projects we've already built with QuantU. Um, so now we've already described what the platform is. Okay, it's a platform for lifelong learning, and let's just keep it simple and say you can learn mathematics on it. Um, so what do we have right now? Well, right now, if you go to the website, all we have are challenges. And the idea of a challenge is mainly, I think we need to take a step back probably and talk about what our fundamental unit of learning is. So our fundamental unit of learning is, do you know what it is, Nathan? Do you know where I'm going with this?
No, it better not be a lesson block because that was a terrible name.
Well, it's better not be a lesson block. It's close to a lesson block. I was going to call it a learning block,
Okay.
but the idea is that you're presented with some amount of information. Let's take an example here. How to add two numbers. So maybe we give you a little bit of background information about how addition works, you know? And then you immediately have to apply what we tell you in the form of a response. So there'll be a question posed immediately after this little snippet of information, and the user has to enter in a response. And then after they've entered in their response, they'll get feedback on it. So there are two types of feedback. There's the feedback about their response in and of itself, like how does that relate to the question? And then there's also an explanation. And an explanation you could think of is showing kind of like what is a correct way to solve this problem. So, and that is our fundamental unit of learning for lots of different types of things. So you could imagine if you're learning, let's just take something that's not mathematics, a language. We could say this word means bird or whatever, right, in the foreign language, and then we give you a sentence and ask you where to put the word in the sentence. That's the immediate way you have to use the word, or you have to pronounce it or something, right? And then that's the user's input, the response to the question. And then we can say, okay, well, you mispronounced the word. Let's use that example. We mispronounced the word. That would be the feedback. And then the explanation would be, here's the correct pronunciation, right?
Yeah.
And so that would be an example of language. With mathematics, you could say, give me the derivative of this function. The user has to enter in. So you explain maybe how derivatives work. You give them a question, give me the derivative of this new function they haven't seen before. They have to enter in their response. It'll tell them whether or not it's correct and it'll give them feedback about how it relates to the actual question. And then it'll show them with the explanation, the full detailed stepwise derivative, So that's kind of our fundamental unit of learning. And if you think about it, it applies to a lot. I mean, tons of things you can learn, you know? Uh, and what challenges are is they kind of wrap that. They're just sort of one-offs. So you could think of it as like a little puzzle to solve about a particular topic. And right now, ours are mathematical topics. So a challenge might be, um, what is the, um, I don't know, integral of some function, and it's like a really complicated, weird function that maybe isn't a basic function or something.
Mm.
And so the user would have to solve that, and then they could get feedback on their answer and then see an explanation. And so that's all that we have currently on our website. And what's almost done is the next thing, which is, well, first of all, before we go on, so this is also based on research. And we'll talk more about it later, but that idea we're talking about with these learning blocks has a lot of research to back it up, that it's really effective in a lot of different situations. But what do you think about challenges themselves? Do you think they're effective? Do you think they're a waste of time?
I've always thought of challenges as kind of something for fun, kind of like
Mhm.
I think they work very well, which we are going to add this, but like leaderboards and who solved it the fastest, who had the best solution, things of that nature, like Hacker Rank or those. I can't think of the other ones right now, but like competitive programming where there's these challenges and you can go
Mhm.
try them out, see how you solve them, see how other people solve them. I think it's a fun way to compete in a academic setting. Now, as far as learning, I don't think it's the best way to learn something because you already have to have because normally it's a complicated question and you have to have a lot of background beforehand.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way of applying what you've learned from something else.
Yeah, actually, I would agree with pretty much everything you said there. And all I would add is that, I think the community aspect is really important
Mm.
for learning as well. Like, it's, it, there are really great ways to learn that you really can't get just by yourself interacting, even with software or a book or something else. Like, you just can't do it. And for that, you do need a community. Like, your brain can only think up so many solutions. And even if there is a correct solution, or like one particular solution that we give as being correct, different people in the community will come up with different ways of solving the same problem. And you will benefit from being able to explore that entire solution space and interacting with all those other people and getting their different perspectives.
Yeah.
So building in community is also another big thing we'll be doing in the future because it's so important. Yeah, so let's move on then to the next thing, the thing we've been working on now, and that's courses. So yeah, I think I'll just ask you before I explain anything about courses. What do you think the point of courses is?
Um, to me, the point of courses is to teach you about a specific like grouping of information.
Hmm.
So I don't know what's a good grouping. Like I mean, you could have a course on basic grammar, and it would just be a course of all the basic grammars of English, and
Hmm.
it would kind of like get you in that base door to really understand basic grammar, and that would be the layout of the course.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's just sort of a grouping, and the question is, at what level do you group the related things?
Yeah.
But it's essentially just a grouping of related uh, little learning, little pieces of knowledge, right? If you could imagine all these nodes in a branching tree, just some subset, some collection of those nodes in the tree, and saying, okay, we're going to learn them now. And we're going to put a label around that and classify them as being related. So an example would be, let's give some more examples. Maybe differentiation from calculus. That would be a bunch of closely related topics about finding the rate at which functions change. Or what's another one from mathematics? Maybe Boolean logic, for instance, a particular, or Boolean algebras. Those are kind of specific and low level, but I think that's where on our platform where courses are going to be focusing. So they're going to be much more condensed. I think the idea is that you could do a course in about 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. You know,
Mm.
these aren't going to be like 6 month long things. And so if you want to, and because it's for lifelong learners and people that want to learn at their own pace and in various topics, let's say you wanted to explore the entire knowledge tree we have on our platform of mathematics, you would just go through all the various courses exploring, um, different fields. So if you would explore, if you wanted to learn things about analysis, you would explore differentiation. Then you might do a course on, um, maybe real analysis, like with limit proofs and that kind of thing. So maybe there's a whole little course on that part of proving different rules of differentiation, and you piece it together like that. And I think at some point, maybe we'll go up one more level and have something, I don't know what we call it, like sections or learning areas, where these courses are kind of like by the community grouped together into broader topics. So you could go in and master, I don't know, some broad area like algebra or calculus or something like that.
Yeah, and those would be built up of like other like courses that are in a tree that you have to kind of
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I think we described source. So now we get to the kind of cool part. So what open source projects have we built doing QuantU?
Well, the only one I think I've done a lot of libraries, but they're just
Mhm.
utility libraries. The Probably the biggest one is probably just the Slate renderer for Svelte because we've been using Svelte, which is dope. Everyone should go use Svelte. But there's a cool text editor library out there called Slate.js, and it's got a renderer for React, but I'm done with React, so I needed a front end in Svelte, so we built a little project to render it on Svelte, and then on top of that, we added a couple of custom plugins because we have a bunch of different ways of writing these lesson documents up, like adding images, videos, code blocks, math, latex, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so for the listeners out there, you could imagine this is like almost being a sort of customized Google Docs for creating learning blocks and lessons and things like that for our platform. So this is a pretty cool library. It's called Svelte Slate, isn't it, Nathan?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the idea is we're just going to be building out that for the Creator Studio. So we're trying to do something that's not really public yet, but it's this Creator Studio. So eventually we'd like to have it where other people could create courses. Like it's all community driven, So eventually people can come to the platform, like on YouTube, anyone can create an account, start creating courses, start adding knowledge to the platform and building out this knowledge tree. But that's going to be a difficult process because we have to figure out how do you keep there from being a bunch of garbage? And, how do you build a strong, vibrant community where it's not toxic and all this kind of stuff. So for right now, we're not doing a lot of the course creation stuff, even though if anyone happens to hear this and is really passionate about ed tech, we'd be interested in working with specific people to create these courses and course content if you're really passionate about it. But yeah, anyway, so that's what we're building out sort of on the back end. And yeah, this Svelte Slate library is pretty cool. Nathan, tell me, why did we go with this as opposed to just like all the other, there's a bunch of different other WYSIWYGs out there, like these editors that you can use to create content.
Well, the two primary reasons I chose it was one, at the time when I was first looking for an editor, I was writing something where I wanted to do collaborative editing on the same document. And their data model allows for CRDTs, I think is what they're called. Essentially just being able to send a small message to a document, and then whoever writes them, they'll get ordered and produce the same document from each other's machines. So it has that in it. And the other thing is the data is all JSON, and it's very easy to search through, especially if we have our own custom things. Say you just want to look at a document and say, give me all the math elements from this thing. We can pull out, look at all the math elements or the images, or if you have definitions, we can pull out the definitions. So it's really easy to parse the data.
Okay, so just for the audience then, so that is actually really important because one of the other things we're trying to build in here is we want to have a really good ability to search. So if you're and annotate, so you could imagine being a student and you're reading through a course, and in a book you might highlight something. Well, whereas in this, eventually we like students to be able to just like basically highlight anything and add their comments to it and say, hey, learn this later, etc. And so this will allow us to build an interactive document where it'll be easy for us to select the different documents and store them and also search through those documents to be able to find particular things. So if you could imagine a student searching for, hey, what's the derivative of this function? And we could go find similar functions. Like this is something I work on. So, we could take sort of like search in general, but you take a function and you go find similar functions, and then you could show that student, hey, here's derivatives of these other functions, and maybe you could find an exact match to their particular problem. Just as an example, but it would allow you, okay, yeah, so it allows you to have really good search functionality. Another thing I just realized is we've also built everything open source for our entire project, right? So the website itself is open source. So if anyone's looking for, and like Nathan said, we're using Svelte, right? So if anyone's looking for a full application built in Svelte, I feel like it's a pretty good example of that.
Yeah.
What else do we have that's open source? I mean, the front and back end's all in JavaScript. We also have all of our other documents are public too. So we've got like a design repository where any design we do or logos is also public for everyone to see and access. And other things like, I don't know, decisions, we like just random documents you have to have, like legal documents, all that kind of stuff's gonna be public too. And the idea is like everything, because Nathan, I know we were actually just talking about this for the podcast, but like we believe more or less in like kind of full transparency on everything. With that you do in your life, just in general. So I think it'll be. So we're trying to also do that with this project, so that everything's out there and for people to see. So people and to learn from.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'll plug in one more thing. We're at QuantU_app on Twitter and YouTube. So if we can get our subscriber count up to 6, Nathan's gonna run a marathon.
Maybe a half marathon.
I love how it is volunteer use for stuff. I should do that though. It's like I just like I volunteer you to do things. It's like Nathan will bench press 400 pounds if you donate $100 so we can keep our servers running.
Actually, I love that because that's costing me about $70 a month right now. So,
dang, 70?
It depends on the load. So if we're deploying a lot, it has to spin up new nodes to deploy. But if we're not, then it's like $40, $50.
Okay. Yeah. So that's another thing we want to do at some point soon is get Patreon integrated. So if you want to support what we're doing, you can. The idea is like we need to build out the community aspect. I mean, right now the main thing is just getting courses, so we can actually create content that beyond challenges that people can learn from, and then building out a community. But once we build out the community, we'd like to be able to have people that are Patreon members and that donate to keep the project going. Have them get some extra things like badges on their characters and I don't know, maybe some other features. Even though I think we talked about this before, Nathan. We haven't really thought about this in detail, but regardless, we'd like everything that has to do with actually learning something to always be available to everyone, ideally for free. Like our goal is to make it for free to everyone.
Yeah, which I mean, right now all we need is like 5 Patreon supporters to pay for the cost of everything right now. So
yeah,
5 people that are watching these videos, just give us $10 each.
Yeah, so we only need to get our viewership from 5 to 5,000. Then we'll get this. Because I think it's like, what is it, like 0.1% donates? It's like.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
No. All right. Got anything else, Nathan?
I don't think so. I think that's everything from my end.
All right. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wrote up. But So this is just kind of like an intermediate podcast. Just give the direction of where it's going. I think next week we'll probably take on some of the actual topics. Hopefully we'll be able to discuss the MVP. So what that and what courses are actually like, and then let's see, maybe like some research on learning and perhaps changing people's minds, because we're reading this book now on how to change people's minds. So that could be interesting to talk about as well. But all right, so thanks to our moms for listening to us.
You just mean or mom. It's the same mother. It's just one person.
Really,
don't act like it's multiple people.
I was trying to make it sound more. I was trying to make it sound more impressive, Nathan.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Goodbye.